Mr. Markίδis, we are used to saying that in crisis there are chances. How feasible is that? How many chances are in the crisis actually? Are there chances, and in what sectors, especially for business?
Well, let me respond theoretically first in terms of why there are opportunities in crisis, and then tell you more specifically where. Imagine being on safari and you're attacked by a lion. Think about it. What do? You panic. You run, you shout, you do whatever. You don't think about it. You don't respond. That's the negative of being in a crisis. You know, we panic. We don't think strategically. We don't think long term. However, there's also some positives that come from the fact that you're in a crisis. Let's go back to the lion example. What are the positives? Well, all of a sudden, there's a sense of urgency. When the lion attacks you, you don't sit there and say, oh, I wonder what I should do and maybe I'll respond tomorrow. You respond very, very quick. There's a sense of urgency. It mobilizes resources. It makes you very, very reactive. It generates adrenaline and you think and you act and so on. It's the same in a crisis. Think of the crisis as the lion. Usually we associate a crisis with all the negatives, and there are many negatives. However, there are also many, many positives. And that is why people always say, psychologists will say, whenever there is a crisis, there are opportunities. Now, what kind of opportunities can we think of? First of all of your competitors are behaving like the man I explained being attacked by the lion. They become very reactive, they are not thinking, they run, they panic. Imagine if you think about it strategically and say, everybody's panicking around me. What will happen if I remain calm, if I remain strategic and so on? That's one of the opportunities. The other is, whenever there's a crisis, there is little resistance to change. People are willing to do things because they know they're going to die, they're going to go bankrupt if they don't do things, which implies that this is the right time to acquire or to make major changes in the organization. There is not going to be a lot of resistance. The unions are not going to react. The employees are not going to react because they know you have to make these changes. Third opportunity is that competitors that may go bankrupt and you have opportunities to go and buy them at a really cheap price. You know, fourth opportunity is that your competitors would be firing people. There's going to be a lot of talent out there available for you to hire and so on. There are many, many opportunities available to all of us in a crisis. The important thing is not to panic, is to step back and think calmly and strategically about what can I do to exploit the crisis around me.
Okay. Now, there's a thin red line, we could say, between where are your limits to change in a good way and where are your limits to change in a bad way, or by taking advantage of what you have to make something that could be good for the company, but in general it could be bad for the employees or for the society. So isn't there a danger in this?
Of course, there's always danger. Business is all about finding the balance between the short term and the long term, between what is good for the company and what is good for society and so on. And, you can talk in general about it, but the key principle is that, yes, there is a balance and you have to use some common sense in deciding what to do. Just to give you an example, I said that in a crisis there are many opportunities. Yes, but at the same time, in a crisis, there are limited resources. So you are not going to say, well, let's go and borrow a lot of money or use all my resources to grow or acquire because there's an opportunity, because you may go bankrupt trying to, invest for the future. There has to be a balance that, between these two. The same with firing people. I agree, companies today as well, especially in Cyprus, facing the crisis, they come and say, look, we have to let some people go. Because if we don't let them go, we'll all go bankrupt and everybody's going to lose their job. But at the same time, they have to think that if you fire these people, Cyprus is a small economy. It's not like, Europe or America where people can find other sources of employment. You fire them, they may spend months and years trying to find another job, and that is bad for society as a whole. So there is a balance that has to be struck there. You need to fire some people, but be careful not too much. And you have to apply your common sense to find that balance.
Are there any recent good examples of companies that changed their strategy and they had a good result?
Oh yeah, there are many. I mean, we could go from let's use some famous example. I know whenever I use these examples in Cyprus, people always say, oh, they are, big American or European companies, but they're famous enough for people to know about. If you take, for example, Procter & Gamble. Procter & Gamble is a huge multinational, fast-moving consumer goods company. Between 1999 and 2001, they fired 2 CEOs in a row. In 2001, I remember there was a cover story in Business Week saying that the company is going bankrupt. And yet they hire this gentleman called H.E. Lafley, and within the next 10 years, Procter & Gamble's stock price has doubled, revenues have tripled, and so on. He fundamentally changed the strategy. What did he do in simple language? He said that all this time, the last 150 years, we spend a lot of money on R&D, trying to produce new products, discover new products. And yet the evidence shows that most new ideas come not from our internal R&D, from the world outside. So he introduced what we now call open innovation as a strategy, which basically meant that not all, but most of the new product ideas in the company had to come from the outside of Procter & Gamble. It wasn't R&D anymore, it was from the outside. And rejuvenated the Procter & Gamble in the last 10 years by bringing ideas from the outside world and so on. It's a strategy that you see the pharmaceutical industry using right now. Companies like Roche and Novartis and so on. What they say is that, why should I be spending 10, 15 billion every year in internal R&D to discover the new drug when there's billions of people out there who may help me discover the new drug? So they implemented open innovation as a strategy and so on. There are many examples of companies that, when you think strategically about how to face the future, you make certain decisions. They may work, they may not work. Nothing is guaranteed in life. But the important thing is to think strategically and have the courage to implement these decisions.
Do you believe that Cyprus is a good field for innovation, or because it's a small economy, small society, it has not got a lot of advantages?
Well, there are different types of innovation, and I think Cyprus will be good for some types and not for others. What do I mean by that? For example, technological innovation. I work with some pharmaceutical companies in Europe. They spend $15-20 billion or euros every year on R&D. Now, you're not going to find anybody in Cyprus with that kind of resources to invest in R&D. So it is highly unlikely that Cyprus will be good in technological innovation. It doesn't mean we're never going to be good at it, or there are other technologies that may not need so many resources. But for the most part, I wouldn't be too optimistic. But however, there are other types of innovation, and the one that I'm particularly fond of is business model innovation. If you look at a company like EasyJet, for example, EasyJet did not discover a new product or a new service or a new technology. They discovered a new business model, a new way of competing in an established industry. Amazon is a business model innovator that then discover a new technology or a new product and so on. Now, business model innovation can be very, very effective. And I know lots of companies that created multi-billion-dollar markets around them on the basis of business model innovation. This kind of innovation does not require a lot of money. All it requires is creativity and the courage to implement it. And I think there's no reason why Cyprus cannot do that. Even though we are a small economy, we can be creative. We have the courage to implement, start small in Cyprus and then expand globally. There's no reason why you cannot do that.
Okay. And one last question, I wanted to ask you about the hydrocarbon discoveries and the energy sector. Do you see, not possibilities, but do you see something dramatic changing in the few next years or in a decade, let's say, in Cyprus? Is it a sector that can make the difference?
Oh, yes. First of all, it depends on the actual deposits we find of oil and gas and so on. But let's assume that there is a significant amount of deposits there. It's a huge industry, as you know, this industry. But it's not just that industry. It's all the peripheral support industries that will be created. It's all the wealth that will be created that will support consumption and entertainment and restaurants and that kind of thing. So depending on the amount, I think there is a big chance that, we will have a big energy boost coming out of that industry that will support other industries in Cyprus. However, can I make this warning? I think we cannot depend on just one industry. I think that it's our responsibility in Cyprus to think strategically about the economy in Cyprus and identify 3, 4, 5 other sectors that we need to promote and promote entrepreneurship in them so that we have a diverse portfolio of industries to rely on in case something wrong goes with the energy sector.
Well, until now we had the services industry and tourism mainly. Do you see any other chances, any other sectors that could be to come up in Cyprus?
First of all, I think that our tourist sector should be upgraded to quality tourists as opposed to mass tourists and so on, and that requires a lot of investment. Secondly, there are many, many other industries that I see potential for Cyprus. If you look at the United States. The United States is divided into states, and I'm particularly fond of the state of Florida. There's no reason why Cyprus and Greece and the Mediterranean region cannot be the Florida of Europe. What does that mean? It's not just tourism. Most Americans go and retire in Florida. In Europe, we have an aging population in the developed part of Europe. The Germans, the French, the whatever. These people, when they reach 75, 80 years old, if you attract them, let's say, into Cyprus, think of all the peripheral services that these people require, the medical services, the entertainment services that they require, the support services, rehabilitation. There's so many industries that we can build around a huge consumer segment that exists out there. It's up to us to develop that sector and convert Cyprus into, the retirement center of Europe.